Sir.
So over the course of history, what happened or what is in place that enables billions of people across this planet to believe that a book built by a process as intensely political as that of the Bible is the way that we should live our lives? And how is it that the same people can dismiss particular parts of the Bible, for instance, the book of Joshua, and still say that that book is the absolute authority, the word with a capital W?
Yeah, well, there's a good, there are possible, I think, decent anthropological answers to that. For a long time, it was the only book everyone knew. And for a long time, there was a heroic struggle, at least I regard it as heroic, to have this incredibly important text, the only one everyone had in some way in common, translated into English out of Latin, so it wouldn't be the special property of a priestly class. And that's what the Protestant Revolution means to me, is John Milton, for example, and William Tyndale and the others who strove to get this book into the hands of the common people, to demystify it, to make it into what it is, at least in its King James version, very great literature, as is the Cranmer Prayer Book. You probably know of the Lady Governor of Texas who, in the discussion on whether religious education should be bilingual in her state, said, well, if English good enough for Jesus, good enough for me. Which means that the Protestant Revolution succeeded even better than I had thought in giving this impression. And English is the only language in which I have to say I understand the Bible. But for many people, it's the only book they have either read or, in many cases, only read a bit of. Now, what you get now as a result of biblical criticism and scholarship, and also various vernacular editions of it, that, unlike the Quran, have made it available to everybody in pretty much every tongue, is people want to take it a la carte. They'll say, I quite like the Beatitudes, I just don't like, I don't mind the story of the rest of the story of the Sermon on the Mount, or the miracle at Cana where water is turned into wine, my personal favorite. But I don't like the other stuff. And I don't like the book of Joshua, and I don't like the injunction to kill all the Midianites down to the last child. That makes me uneasy. Well, they're out of luck. This stuff is either the Word of God or it isn't. And they have to make up their minds whether they think it's that or man-made. And when they've done that, they'll feel better. But the attempt to have it a la carte is, to me, contemptible. I keep finding on this trip, when I debate people, I'd have to write a different book for every priest I debated. Because if you say to a Baptist, even in Georgia, well, sir, you say you're an ordained Baptist minister and indeed a teacher of baptism at the local college, may I know whether you concur with John Calvin and his view of predestination and damnation, or not? May I further know if you think it applies to me? And if you don't think so, may I know on what authority you don't think it? They don't like the question one bit. They don't. And not because you're in front of an educated audience either. They're not sure what they think. They'd rather say, well, some of that's metaphorical. What's metaphorical about telling people that their fate was decided before they were born and they can't change it even by good works? Even by doing the right thing won't change it. You were picked for hell before you were born. You're a goat, not a sheep. By the way, who wants to be a sheep? A religion that calls itself a flock, you already know a lot about. They don't like it, ladies and gentlemen. They really don't. I say to the rabbi, so your daily prayers begin, don't they, by saying, thank God he didn't make me a woman or a Gentile, a goy. Isn't that the prayer? Well, I don't always say it. Okay. I'm glad to hear it. You come from a sect that doesn't shake hands with women. I'm not going to shake hands with you. I have views of my own about this, but I've told you what they are, and I'm willing to be tested on them and questioned on them. Why aren't you? Why do you want it a la carte all the time? This morning, the Conservative guy, very nice, extremely nice fellow, on the local Fox radio, John someone. Yeah, extremely courteous, gave me a lot of time, and I said, well, for example, I say to Catholics, come on, you may say you're a Catholic, you don't really believe in the virgin birth. He said, well, I do. And I thought, oh, Christ, that's the first one I've met it had to be this morning. And I said, well, are you really saying you do? He said, yes, I absolutely do. I believe in the Immaculate Conception of Jesus. And I said, now, hold on a second. The Immaculate Conception is not the same as the virgin birth. He said, it isn't? No, the Immaculate Conception says that Mary was conceived without sin, without any stain, not that her son was conceived without the intervention. Very bluntly, he had no idea. Didn't even know what he didn't believe. It's come to something when a Catholic on Fox TV has to be told his theology by me. And I hope if he hears of this, he doesn't regard it as an abuse of his hospitality. I must say he was a real gentleman to me the rest of the time. So, who's up? Sir.
Thank you. Earlier, when you first started speaking, you spoke about fascism. I think it was Aimé Césaire who talked about the relationship between colonial expansion and fascism. Basically, he was stating that because of European expansion, colonialist, that fascism was a result, and that's why they got the rise of fascism in Europe. I was wondering what your thoughts were in that United States, all of our wars except World War II essentially have been colonialist expansion, and now we're seeing the disappearance of habeas corpus and our constitutional rights and torture and those kinds of things. I was wanting to know, particularly in lieu of your new citizenship, how you felt about that.
Thank you. I'm an admirer of the work of Aimé Césaire, who the gentleman just mentioned, who was the great poet of negritude, as it was called in French West Africa, under the time of Leopold Senghor, who was, I think, his mentor in this matter. And it's certainly true that the relationship between the rise of fascism in Europe and the decomposition of colonialism in Africa is a very intense one. Just to give you one example, the brown shirts of the German Nazi Party were bought as army surplus from the Goering family, which had a huge estate in southwest Africa, now Namibia, where General von Trotha had first launched his campaign of extermination against the Herero people, before even the First World War, where they already had, first, the experience of genocide, and second, a lot of spare uniforms that could be used to fit out a horrible militia. And Mussolini's fascism was felt much more intensely in Libya and in the gassing of the people of Abyssinia, as it was then called, Ethiopia now, than it was anywhere else. And you could make the British Union of Fascists largely grew out of the Black and Tan movement that was an attempt to repress the people of Ireland. Interestingly, by the way, the Pope's support of Mussolini in Abyssinia was partly because though the Abyssinians were and are the oldest practitioners of Christianity in Africa, they nonetheless practiced the monophysite heresy, which was thoroughly condemned by the Council of Chalcedon in the year 524. So he had it in for them still on this point. Yes, you're right. As to the thing that you tack on at the end, I knew someone was going to try this. I'm only here to sell my book, okay? But you do have the honor of addressing someone who is a named plaintiff in the lawsuit brought with the help of the American Civil Liberties Union against the National Security Agency and against the Justice Department. Which has so far carried in the courts saying that it is illegal and unconstitutional to listen to the telephone conversations of an American without a warrant. I'm appalled that when I wasn't even a citizen yet, I had to go to law to uphold that simple point. But we've won so far. But it's going to require a lot of vigilance to keep winning. The recent, I think, complete collapse of the Justice Department's witnesses and main spokesman on other matters in front of major hearings in the Senate is extremely encouraging. When we brought the suit, we didn't know that people were gathering around John Ashcroft's bedside trying to guide his palsied hand over this order. Ashcroft, the man who says in this country, remember this, when he was a senator, he said in America, we have no king but Jesus. A statement that is exactly 2 words too long.